Hello, CFA Nation, Gabe.
Hey, that's C-Fam, Nick.
And we're here today to review a special film. Nick, you want to introduce that film?
Yes, we are reviewing a documentary, a British-made documentary from 2010 called Fire in Babylon. This has been requested by many viewers, but it is also a Patreon request by Abhilash. So thank you so much, Abhilash, for being a patron, for supporting us, and for bringing in this request. We are going to be talking about the hour and about 28-minute documentary Fire in Babylon, which is about the 1970s, 1980s, and they even mentioned a little bit of the 1990s West Indies test team.
Right. And it was very interesting because the way this was shot, you really got to get not as much access as the test gives you, what I mean, like behind the scenes access, but you got to really see a lot of the reactions from a lot of the opponents, a lot of other players, what these players went through. And the West Indies, for a lot of people, and I mean there might be people here that don't realize it's a whole bunch of islands, which include Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, I believe, Guyana, right? Is Guyana one of them?
I don't know about that one, but
Not sure about that one yet.
You were on a roll.
Okay, scratch that last one. But in any event, you got all these island people who they were once just like India at one point, just like pretty much, even America, they were a colony of England, right? And after they got their freedom, they had the same mentality that India and pretty much the entire world has. Like, we want to beat England at their own game. So, Jamaica, cricket becomes really, really big, and they want to beat, quote unquote, beat the colonizers, beat the masters at their own game. And the story follows the four horsemen. They call the four horsemen of apocalypse because these guys are really, really, really fierce when they bowl. Pace bowling, fast bowling. But I like how it gives you the background of the story where first, the team was considered pretty soft, and I can't remember the word they used to describe the team, but it was kind of just meant like, they were just entertaining to watch, but they weren't anything to be. Calypso, yeah, they called them the Calypso, right? But they were just not serious cricketers, so not a team not to be taken seriously. But everybody enjoyed them going out and playing. Well, they went out, and the Australian national test team absolutely beat them up. When I tell you beat them up, they hadn't ever experienced something like that before. Where Australia at that time was known for having the fast bowlers, the pace bowlers, and after that time, they're like, "Oh, is this how the game's played? So we're going to go get us some fast bowlers." And then the captain of the team goes out, finds some fast bowlers, creates this whole new aura for the team where we're going to be that Australian team. We're going to be dominant. They mentioned that a lot of times when other teams went to go play the Australian team, they were just trying to survive for dear life. It was the Australian team and everybody else. Well, they were going to be that team. And this is the story of how they become that team.
Yes, and you started off with the captain. I think his name was Cliff Lloyd. I'm just making sure I got the names here correctly. We get introduced to a lot of the players. Viv Richards. Here we go. Colin Croft, Gordon Greenridge, Clive Lloyd. Excuse me if I say Cliff. Clive Lloyd, right. Derek Murray, Michael Holding, and again, the thing that's a theme in this documentary is, and I don't feel like it was heavy-handed in any way. I didn't think it was ingenuine. I thought it went pretty well with what the story they were telling, is how they end the series, or the documentary, going against England, and they talk about how it's like the slaves battling the masters, and they bring into the history about how their ancestors were taken from Africa and dropped in the different colonies of Britain, and how there was a lot of those undertones going on in what happened. With, like you, I thought it was really cool how they started off from the beginning. I really related it to like the 49ers from NFL, their history where they were non-existent for the first 20, 30 years. And then they got themselves a Bill Walsh, and then they got themselves a Joe Montana, and they got themselves a Jerry Rice and other players, and they were dominant for the next 10, 15 years. Back to the West Indies, I will say to start off with, I was watching the documentary in the first half, waiting for them to mention the World Cup, because I know West Indies won the first 2 World Cups. They were in the third one, lost to India by a huge upset, but they won in 75 and 79. And they start talking about how the team is garbage in 70. Oh, they don't say garbage, but calypso, how they weren't really too competitive until about 76, 77, 78 till 1980. And I'm like, how is that even possible? You won 2 World Cups in the 70s. It took me that long to realize that this was on test. Those World Cups were in one-day cricket, and obviously those are 2 different formats. But this is focusing on the one-day squad, the international squad, not the international test squad. I'm sorry, on the international test squad, not on the one-day squad. And as we have learning about cricket, test is the original form of cricket. This is the granddaddy of them all. And our viewers that are watching this right now, how are you guys doing? Who are more old school, they love test cricket. They live and they breathe and they die by test cricket. And some of the comments we've gotten is we don't care about T20. We don't even care about the ODIs as much, the one-day cricket too much. But it's all about test cricket. So for me, that was kind of confusing until I realized for myself, this is the test team. That makes sense. But like you said, they had to go out and get the players. They had to get the fast bowlers. They had to not only compete, and they weren't trying to, I know when you said it, you didn't mean this, but they weren't trying to copy anyone's style, but they understood, like, really, we can have these balls right next to our head and get hit, and no one's going to help us out. No one's going to complain for us. Okay, we can play at that game too. And then when they got fast bowlers, and these fast bowlers were not afraid to come into your kitchen, so to speak, to bring that ball right up to your head. And a lot of these guys even have really any padding at all. And if they did, it was a little bit of protective padding in the 70s and 80s. But they were not afraid to be themselves. They were not afraid to come and attack that opposing team. Because if you look at us as Calypso, if you look at us as less than what you think we are, then you're going to have another thing coming when we show you our skills and we show you what we have. And it seemed like the captain, Clive Lloyd, it seemed like this guy, and maybe it's the same amount of power they have right now in captain, but it seemed like this guy was like team runner and everything. I mean, he was scout, he was manager, he was signee, GM. He was everything for this team and bringing this team together. And I thought that was really cool to see that. The last thing I'm going to say at this point, before I switch back to you, is I'm really impressed with the honesty of this documentary. This documentary was not afraid to be honest with what was going on with the civil rights at that time, with the different racial undertones and whatnot.
Right.
And this filmmaker, Stephen Riley, he is British himself. He's not afraid to look at the history. He's not afraid to, obviously he loves cricket, and he's not afraid to look at this and tell this story that he feels is worth being told. And I thought that was really cool. I did a great job.
No, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times, the hardest thing to do is be honest with oneself. You know what I mean? And say, okay, this is what's going on. And obviously we can't get past it until we acknowledge it. So he acknowledged that there was a lot of racial overtones there. And they talk about how when the team went over to Australia and went to England, people were saying derogatory comments, making racial comments and whatnot. And that existed, obviously. Look at the time, early 70s, late 60s. And they even mentioned, Muhammad Ali, who also in America was a very, very big athlete and was very political as well, and took some stances against racism in America. They mentioned Bob Marley in the video. I mean, it was so many cool aspects of this movie. I mean, we're all over the place, really. But I guess that's the only way to do this kind of review. So one thing I did want to mention before I forget was I found it really interesting. How when Australia, they were known as the bad boys, so to speak, you know what I mean? They were a dominant team, but when they were fast bowling, it was, that was just, par for the course. Kind of like now. Remember when I watched the test and I got so upset because Chris Archer was throwing at the Australian team and people were like, no, that's just the game. It's par for the course.
Joffrey Archer?
Joffrey Archer. I don't say Chris Archer. There's an American baseball player named Chris Archer.
Love baseball, yes.
So yes, Joffrey Archer. Thank you for correcting me, Nick. But
I love to.
So I found it interesting though that when the West Indies went out, and I want to say it was against India, the first time when they presented their pace bowlers or something like that, people were like, "Oh, these guys are savages. We need to start regulation and change how far the run up they get, or how many bouncers they can throw because they're injuring players." Wait a minute, this was what Australia's been doing all the time. This is how Australia became dominant. So it was okay for Australia, but it wasn't okay for the West Indies. You know what I mean? So I found really interesting that, again, this is a British filmmaker that still presents that truth and shows that truth. How there was a double-edged, or not a double-edged sword, but there was a double standard there. You know what I mean?
No, but, you're definitely accurate, and that's a great point, because I was taken back by that too, because the self-righteous, and we all are sometimes self-righteous. We really are. Hopefully we're not too much, but the self-righteous person inside of us wants to say, hey, that's not fair. They're only winning because they're headhunting and they're getting dangerous with how they're bowling. Well, hold on for a second. Isn't that what's been going on since, how long? You mentioned Australia, Jeff Thompson and other players, and who's the other guy, Lily or something like that. Yeah. These guys had no problem, and they were applauded for it. And like, oh, these guys are the best. There's no way they're trying to hurt someone. But when you have the West Indies squad do it, like, oh, it's not fair anymore, just because they were and that's not their only game. I mean, their bowlers they had 4 guys who were able to throw over 90 miles per hour. I mean, that's just insane to have 4 guys on your squad to be able to bowl at that level. But you also got to be able to swing the bat too. You don't win Test cricket just by bowling. It helps, obviously. But you got guys like Vivian Richards, who was I was really impressed with him. I mean, this guy, and if his name's not Vivian, excuse me, maybe just Viv Richards. I was really impressed by this guy throughout the entire documentary, because he really seemed like a leader. And they mentioned at the very end that he became the captain once Lloyd retired, which made perfect sense. But this guy seemed like such an awesome person. And when, again, you said all over the place, I'm going to go kind of off track a little bit. When they go and they play that series in South Africa that had a lot of controversy because the whole
I wanted apartheid. I wanted to talk about that.
Thank you. Yes, the whole segregation that was going on, to the upteenth degree, with all of that stuff. He was one of them that said, no, I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay back here. I'm not going to be part of that. The people that went, I kind of understand, this is how we're going to make some money. This is my job. I have to go make some money, even though it's kind of maybe unethical. Those guys were ostracized, and Viv Richards made the right choice, made the smart choice. And I'm not going to say the other guys were greedy that went, because I'd probably be tempted to do that too. They made a decision, but Viv Richards, I was just really, really impressed with this guy. But yes, it was unfair that they said, you can't do this, but the other teams can. Like, no. And the one guy, I can't remember his name. He might've been Colin. I can't remember. Maybe Croft. He said, I didn't go out there trying to hurt anyone, but I'm going to be me. And even though you didn't see on the outside, I felt for those guys that I hit on the inside, but this is what I do. This is why I'm here, to bowl, not to hurt people, but to bowl. And if they get hit in the process, that's the game. I was really impressed with that guy.
No, definitely. And, I think you hit one of the very, probably the most important part of this documentary, when, these guys aren't making a lot of money. Even though they're playing for the West Indies and the national team, they're not making a lot of money. And this is how they feed their families. And I don't know if it was just tongue in cheek when he said, he turned down $1 million to go, but he turned down a large amount of money to go play. 17 other players from the West Indies ended up going and ended up getting banned for life because there was
that many? Wow, I missed that number. That's crazy.
And I think that the South Africa at the time was completely banned from cricket because of the of apartheid and the politics over there. And I feel for those guys that made that choice, though. You don't understand. I remember that I was watching a documentary about who El Duque is?
Yeah. Okay. I can't stand him because he helped the Yankees beat the Padres in the World Series in '98. And I couldn't stand why this guy was so big time, but I actually watched a documentary on him, and that was very informative. He's like a good guy.
Yeah, so El Duque and later on his brother, Livan Hernandez, they played for the Cuban national team. And these guys were superstars, absolute superstars. But like he said, for all this we play for Cuba, since it's a communist country, and obviously the politics over there, these guys were living in squalor. You know what I mean? They were living, and their families, they weren't making any money. It wasn't like they were living high off the horse. So a lot of times when the players went overseas, they would take that opportunity to then go ahead and seek asylum from the United States or wherever they were, okay, and get out of Cuba, because the situation was just that bad. You know what I mean? And so you don't know what the players who did go end up playing in South Africa. Obviously, were they saying that they supported apartheid? No. Were they saying that they agree with the politics? No. They're saying, I got to feed my family. So I felt really bad for those players. Then, I felt it was even more disrespectful when, and he mentioned, in order to play in South Africa, you had to be an honorary white person for a day. What? Like, but this is the kind of stuff that happens. And I loved how, some people stood on their morals and said, absolutely not. It was a financial choice they had to make, and they did so. And some people, I'm not going to say wrong or right choice, but that those people, they even said, some of the guys that went on the team that went out there never recovered. Some of them ended up being banned for life. They became drug addicts.
Some became drug addicts. I just want to correct myself real quick. I said Colin Croft was a bowler I was mentioning. I made that mistake. It's actually Andy Roberts was the bowler I was mentioning. Colin Croft was one of the guys that did go to South Africa during that whole controversy, and he was banned afterwards because of it.
Right. But man, I mean, there's so many different things to talk about. How they the pink uniforms, how you had the first team, and they were like, oh, they're gonna go out there in pink uniforms, and at first they were kind of like laughing at it or whatnot, but when these guys are still coming out with your ferocity or whatnot, they were like, oh man, these guys are the real deal. And
but I love that, because that would make pink now become your least favorite color because you're scared of it, because these guys are no joke. I think that was around the same time they were getting fit. To your point about the money, going back a little bit when they played in that World Series, they called it in Australia, I believe, the grand prize was $30,000. Can you imagine splitting $30,000 amongst a team and whoever, delegates from West Indies that represents? That's not a whole lot of money. And then to go from there to, what was it, 5-6 years later, where you had the whole South Africa incident, and they're offering you, maybe it wasn't $1 million, but maybe it was $80,000. That's a whole lot of money. That can go a long way for your family. And if you're right, if it was 17 other players, I can see the justification where, 16 other people are going and they're going to get paid. And I'm pretty good at cricket. So, it's not like I'm breaking the law. I'm going to go ahead and go. I can see making that decision. But man, it was such a tough, bad decision in hindsight, because what it cost them in the long run. But yeah, there's just so much going on in this documentary. And, I was waiting for that World Cup to be mentioned. Once I got over that, I was really able to focus in on what they were saying and what was going on. And I really enjoyed it. The thing I loved the most was at the end, spoiler alert, where they mentioned that from 1980 to 1995, 15 years of test matches, they didn't lose a single series. Now, they may have lost a match, but not a single series, no matter where they're at. That is domination. That is, I hate to mention it. Oh, I hate to mention it. But that is the 1990 New York Yankees dominance, the dynasty dominance, where it lasts for that long. And we're talking 15 years. The Yankees were a dynasty for about 7 or 8 years, which is still impressive in one sport. But that is unbelievable, to the point where every time you play these guys, you're going to lose. You have no chance, because these guys are the best. And they lost their captain, Lloyd, but they got Viv Richards to be the next captain. And man, did he lead them to the promised land for the next 13 years. I want to mention the series against England, but I'll let you take the reins on this one, because I thought there was a whole lot to talk about with that series when they went to England, and England was talking about, first of all, you had, I don't think it was the same series. I think it was a different series where they mentioned the groveling. The guys said they're going to grovel against us. But I think it was the series after that when they came back again, and England was saying in the media, we think we have the right squad to beat these guys. We think we can do it. And then, not so much.
Yeah, but it's so funny, though, because the first time they went from saying, oh, we're going to make them grovel, and that was like every coach will tell you, every player will tell you, never say anything to the media. It's this fire, it's ammunition,
bulletin board
material
material
for the other team. And you're gonna make them grovel? What? Again, that connotation of slavery and begging. And
that is
really,
such a horrible connotation. That is such a horrible word to use. And when you first heard it in the documentary, you're just like, oh, this guy, what are you thinking?
right. And they absolutely abuse them. I mean, abuse them. It was like, I think they said they won 5-0. Was that correct? I know they swept them. They won like 5-0. It was insane. They embarrassed them at home, which was insane. So the second time, even Croft comes out and says, like, look, we wanted to make sure that the first time wasn't a fluke. You know what I mean? That we can go back in there and do it again. And then they had the one English bowler, I can't remember, but the guy had the glorious mustache. And he was trying to get in their heads. And he's like, you know what? I'm coming for your head. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like to just go ahead and say it that way. He's pointing at his head. Like every time you come up there, come to your head. And they had the one batsman. I cannot remember his name. They said he was the best batsman there.
For England or for West Indies?
No. For the West Indies.
You're not talking about the new kid that came up and was a rock star.
No. You're talking about the kid that broke his hand. I'm talking about.
How crazy was that? That was awesome.
Broke his hand and kept playing. I'm talking about.
Let me see.
Sorry, I got to look it up because it was so.
You're not talking about Richards, are you?
No, it wasn't Richards. It was. Malcolm Marshall is the kid you're talking about. I am talking about.
It says right here that Viv Richards is shown as dominating the Test series as a batsman when he scored 829 runs in 4 tests in 2 double centuries. It's got to be Viv Richards.
It might be Viv Richards, man. I'm like, and that's so frustrating. Anyway, he gets hit because he says, I never used to wear all this protection. Remember, he's got the bald head. He said, I never used to wear all this protection. I would go out there with my cap or whatever, and I never wanted to let them intimidate me. And he gets hit. The guy throws a bouncer and he gets hit right on the face. And they're like, oh man, he's gonna be out for the series or whatever. And he's like, dude, I was in pain, but you can never let the other side know that you're hurt. And he said he just shook it off and went. And he went to play. And he said he wasn't going to be out there complaining or whatever. They're throwing at you. That's okay. You got to bat. Defend yourself. That's how he looked at it. You know what I mean? I got to bat. Defend yourself. And I love that. The kid, like you said, you were talking about Malcolm Marshall. This kid was an absolute beast. Oh, my gosh. When it reminds me of, and I hate saying it, Kurt Schilling and the bloody sock, where when you're injured and you're still who was the quarterback that I think he tore his ACL in his knee, kept playing through a touchdown afterwards.
That was my boy Philip Rivers.
You know what I mean? Like when you see those kind of performances, you're like, oh my gosh, like broken hand went out and bowled beautifully and got the winning hit. How do you bat with a broken hand? Got the winning hit. Did you see that? Like the ball came at him. They were throwing at him. He jumps out of the way with one hand. He hits the ball and he's able to defend the wickets. This guy's amazing. Unbelievable.
I could see the bowling with the one hand. The fielding would be near impossible, but the batting, I couldn't believe that. You're right. I mean, you're talking about Hollywood script. My arm is broken. I'm just going to use my one arm, hit a walk-off home run natural style or something like that. I mean, there's so many awesome stories, but that England series where they think that we got the squad, we can do it. And this is English. There are no slouches or England and 5-0. I mean, they mentioned, I think it was the first test match, the first test match. They were kind of flat-footed and they weren't really hitting their stride and they weren't really, doing the best, and they were getting a little nervous. But then I can't remember. No, that wasn't the World Series where Packer yelled at them. But anyways, they just got behind each other and they were able to step forward and they just beat the brakes off these guys, like you like to say. Absolutely fantastic.
I do like, though, at the end where after it was all said and done, the English players, understood it's a sport, you know what I mean? And there were no hard feelings. And even the English players embraced the West Indies like, man, you guys are the best in the world. And, don't listen to the noise. Don't listen to, you guys do what you do, because you show that mutual respect where, hey, I may not like you when we're on the field, but after the game, we're all athletes. You know what I mean? There's this camaraderie that's there. I saw the same thing in the test series where I hated Joffrey Archer, but you see Joffrey Archer afterwards with the Australian team. They're all in the dugout. You know what I mean? No, not dugout, but in the clubhouse. Eating and talking and fraternizing, because after all, we're athletes, and for the most part, nobody, like you said, really wants to hurt somebody. It's part of the game. Now I understand it. You remember how worked up I got with that Jeffrey Archer. I was like, whoa.
You're
but
still mentioning it.
It's part of the game. And if it's part of the game, then, and everybody plays by the same rules, then, you know what you're getting into. And, listen, all sports are dangerous, man. It's me and Savannah have had this conversation many times. My kids play baseball, play football. One thing she will not let me do is put the gloves on them. And she's like, no. I'm like, they could get hurt playing, baseball, football, whatever. Trey, who we fear because Trey's at this point almost 6'2". He's like 6'1.5", almost 6'2". Bro,
it's not fair.
Yeah, my wife's Hawaiian. She's on the small side, and she's like 5'7". Her brother's 6'2". Her grandfather was like 6'5". In any event, to make a long story short, Trey's super skinny though. He's only like $140, soaking wet, and we're always afraid he's gonna get hurt at playing football. Nope, his two big injuries have been playing baseball. His knee, he sprained his MCL, and he broke his. He had like 4 stitches in his head when he had that collision in the outfield with another player. So you could get hurt playing any sport. You know what I mean? It's just part of the game, and I understand that now. Now I understand pace bowling and bouncers. And okay, it's part of the game, so I'm good with it. But I did like that, and one of the Jamaican players says, that's what you call cross cultural. What do you say? Cross culturalization or something like that, where we're teaching them, West Indies style cricket. It was hilarious.
No, there was so many good stories and so many good themes that, again, were not heavy handed whatsoever. And for someone like both of us, we're not Jamaican, we're not from that part of the world, or what. I mean, you grew up partly in the Dominican Republic, but that's a little different. We have no skin in the game, and it was very, very intriguing. It was very, very entertaining. I thought it was interesting too how they started implementing all these rules. They listed all the different rule changes because of West Indies dominance, and just maybe because it's not fair, who knows? And they were still able to dominate for the next decade after that. Was really cool. One of the things that I really was excited about was the Jamaican music that we got throughout. They were able to bring these guys and, these guys and, just being themselves, and they're singing their beautiful songs about cricket and whatnot. I'm not going to claim to be a huge Bob Marley fan or Jamaican music fan. It's not really, the top of my list, but I enjoyed every one of those songs, and I love how it worked in to the story of the documentary. Again, Stephen Riley, who directed this, did a fantastic job telling the story, letting us know about the evolution of Test cricket, which is, it's got to be the hardest type of cricket out there because it's so long and it's so grueling. And these guys were just dominant. And they were able to put on heroic acts, like you said, Malcolm Marshall and the one hand and everything. I mean, unbelievable. But that's our review on this. I guess we should give it a grade. That's what we usually do for reviews. So I'm going to go ahead and give my grade for Fire in Babylon as a documentary. I'm going to give this an A- easily, because it gave me so much information. There was culture mixed in. There was the music. There was the storytelling. There was, his civil rights, history, all that kind of stuff, which are things that I really enjoy, civil rights and history, and, people overcoming insurmountable odds and doing it because of hard work and because of playing by the rules. Again, going back to the guy's comment when they were getting mad at them for headhunting, he said, we didn't complain once when Australia came after us. Not once did we complain to anybody. So you need to stop complaining and just play the game. I thought that was, very fair and very awesome. I give it an A- just because the pacing wasn't my favorite for this documentary. And I get it's a documentary, but it was hard to follow at times. I would have liked to, get a slow down in some areas, maybe skip some other areas, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm giving it an A-.
Oh, that's a pretty high grade. Myself, I'm gonna give it an A. Unlike you, I grew up in New York, so there's a big population in New York. I mean, Brooklyn, it is, you know, little Jamaica over there, you know what I mean? And there's other pockets where there's a lot of Caribbean people in New York, okay? Dominican Republic, Dominican Republic, Dominicans have their own neighborhood. Puerto Ricans have their own neighborhood. Again, Jamaicans have their own neighborhoods. So, you know, I'm used to going to the Jamaican shops and getting my cocoa bread and my beef patties. You know what I'm saying? They got this drink, man. It's called ginger beer, bro. It's non-alcoholic, but it's like spicy. You know, like spicy soda is the only way I could explain it, man. Oh, it's awesome. They don't have that out here. It's awesome though. But you know, it's funny though, because I never knew cricket was such a big part of
Right.
Jamaican culture and Caribbean culture. It's not in Dominican Republic, I can tell you that much, or in Puerto Rico. Baseball is in Dominican Republic and in Puerto Rico. But Jamaicans, for the most part, whenever you talk to them and you hear them, you know, people that are actually from the islands, they're huge football fans. International football, or as us Americans call it, soccer. You know, they're huge football fans. Even though, again, you know, Jamaica being such a small place or whatnot, and of course this is the West Indies when we're talking about this documentary. It's crazy because you think about it. They're like even somebody in the documentary said, we became the best in the world. We beat these nations that have, you know, millions of people, and we're just a couple of specks on a map. You know what I mean? Our islands are just little dots on a map or whatnot. Like out here, think about it. You got the best of the best of the best, because there's so much competition and so many different programs. Same thing with, I'm sure, Australia and England. But over there, man, you got this little island. I know Dominican Republic, you know, you can go back and forth in one day, the entire island. You know what I'm saying? So they got such a small population to choose from, as far as, you know what I'm saying? Selecting players, that you're just like, you know, you're in awe, like, wow, these guys got to be so dominant. And again, it came from this small pool of players. That's even more impressive.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the few dots, because that was the one quote I wrote down. I don't think this is word for word, but he says, for a few dots on the map, we dominated the world. I thought that was super powerful. I'm glad you mentioned it, because it was the one thing I had written down here that really struck a note with me. I mean, think about that. For 15, 20 years, winning the first 2 World Cups in one-day cricket. I mean, these guys are awesome. And I mean, they're not done. They're still playing awesome cricket over in the West Indies. And,
Right.
you know, some things have changed, obviously. But, I mean, you're right. It's for a small population to dominate in that way is just phenomenal. I thought it was cool to hear that Bob Marley was a big cricket fan and whatnot. And you had the one guy that was part of his group there that was talking. You know, he had the nice suit on with a cool hat, and he was sitting on cinder blocks. I mean, I thought that was awesome. Love reviewing this. Let us know what you think about a review for Fire in Babylon.
I forgot. I didn't actually give my grade. A, guys. I give it a solid A. Give it a solid A.
You said a solid A at the very beginning, but then maybe you forgot.
Okay, there we go.
But we hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out Boring Reviews and see what's going on over there. That's where we usually do movie reviews, but since this was on cricket, we did on this channel. We hope you're all staying safe, and we hope everyone is having an enjoyable day. And until next time.
That's 6 runs.